The following sequence of videos document one line of descent from Thomas White to Jesse Byron White. Thomas White is the father of Ebenezer White, Ebenezer White is the father of Samuel White, and so forth. The following videos tell their stories. This line of descent spans a time period of nearly 400 years from around 1600 to almost 2000, as you can see from this timeline chart. The following videos have been developed to be as interesting as possible. Since listing many dates of birth, marriage and death is boring, many dates that are known have been deliberately omitted, and information about children, other than those children in this one line of descent, is limited usually to just their names. If listeners to these videos are interested in knowing more facts, they can visit a genealogy website such as Ancestry.com, MyHeritage.com or Genie.com. John Vinton wrote a book entitled The Vinton Memorial, which is really a genealogy document where he meticulously documents many families who lived in Weymouth, Massachusetts in the 1600s and later. In the introduction to his book, he states that it is next to impossible to obtain records of immigrants before they arrived in New England because the British authorities considered people who came to New England to be disloyal, nonconformist, troublemakers, and they destroyed their records in Old England. Because of that fact, almost nothing is known about Thomas White's ancestors with any degree of certainty.
Greetings, fellow Whites. My name is Thomas White. My son Ebenezer White is in this line of descent. I made this video to tell you my story. The seal, you see, is the seal of the community of Wessagusset, which today is Weymouth, Massachusetts. The motto on the seal in Latin means, to work is to conquer. Every person has 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so forth. I am the 8th, or 9th, or 10th great-grandparent to many of you, who are listening to me now. I am, for example, the 8th great-grandparent of Arvid White, and I am the 9th great-grandfather of Debbie Pope. I am the 10th great-grandfather of Cody Pope. When I say I am the 8th great-grandfather of Arvid White, it means you have to go back 8 plus 2 equal to 10 generations to get to me. Every person has 1024 8th great-grandparents, and twice as many 9th great-grandparents. I am not any more important than any of your other great-grandparents, but if your last name is White, and you trace your ancestors back from father to father to father, all of which are Whites, you will come to me. Many of you would probably like to see a picture of me, but photography, as you know, it was not invented until 160 years after I died, and apparently none of you have any drawings or paintings of me. Sometime before 1635, I traveled from Old England to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and took up residence in the plantation of Wessagusset, which is now Weymouth, Massachusetts. The seal, you see, is their seal. Massachusetts Bay Colony was not exactly the same area as the state of Massachusetts today. Massachusetts Bay Colony included what is now Massachusetts, and what is now the state of Maine. New York was a little different than it is today also. I was admitted a free man of the Massachusetts Bay Colony on March 3, 1635. At that time, I was a resident of Weymouth and a member of the Weymouth Church. In order to become a free man, I had to appear before the leaders of the Weymouth Church and testify that I had had a transforming spiritual experience by God's grace. That fact had to be confirmed by the leaders of the Weymouth Church in order for me to become a free man. Speaking of the Weymouth Church, we did not have nearly as many hymns as you have today. We were, of course, familiar with Martin Luther's hymns, including "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." Martin Luther died about 53 years before I was born. It was a very big deal to be a free man. Only free men were allowed to vote. If you provide proof that you are my descendant, you will qualify to become a member of the prestigious Winthrop Society. The Winthrop Society is named after John Winthrop, who was the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It is difficult to become a member of the Winthrop society as it is to become a member of the Society of the Cincinnati, the Order of Founders and Patriots, the Mayflower Society, and Maryland's Ark and Dove Society. They all demand a proven lineage back nearly 4 centuries, to at least one of only about 1,000 settlers. The Winthrop Society currently consists of over 400 descendants of the first settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. I want to make some comments about being a free man. You should realize that, in fact, we were not free and independent at that time. We were subjects of the British Empire. The American Revolution did not occur until more than 100 years after my death. However, we, as free men, had the vision of freedom and independence, and that was important because usually the vision precedes the reality. My name appears in the earliest records of Weymouth, and I was one of the first settlers there. I lived in East Weymouth in an area known as Old Spain. You might find it interesting that there is a town in Old England called Weymouth. It is the town on the mouth of the River Wey. For many years I was one of the select men of Weymouth, and was often chosen on important committees. I commanded a military company, which was a post of distinguished honor and responsibility. I was a representative in the General Court in 1637, 1640, 1657 and 1671. I married Hannah Workman, also known as Anne, in 1636 when I was 37 years old and Anne was around 34. Anne was born between 1601 and 1603 in Weymouth. Anne and I had 5 children. The first was Joseph, the second Hannah, the third was Samuel, the fourth was Thomas, and the fifth was Ebenezer. Those of you listening to me now, who are descendants of a White, are descendants of my 5th son, Ebenezer. Ebenezer plans on making a video, similar to this one, to tell you a little about himself and his family. I have many descendants, many of whom have been persons of education, distinction and worth. Anne died on February 14, in 1669, in Weymouth, when she was about 67 years old, and I died on August 28, in 1679, also in Weymouth, at the age of 80. My will is dated July 5, 1679. I ordered that my funeral expenses be paid out of my estate. I gave my son Joseph all my wearing apparel. I gave my great Bible to my son Samuel's wife. I gave my brass kettle to my granddaughter, Lydia White. I gave my brass pot to my granddaughter, Hannah Baxter. I gave my pewter platter to my grandchild, Mary White. I gave 5 shillings in money to all my grandchildren. I gave £5 in money to my son Ebenezer, towards the education of my grandchild, provided my son Ebenezer would bring him up to be a minister. I gave 20 shillings in money to our reverend pastor, Mr. Samuel Terry. I gave 20 acres of the Apple division of Weymouth Town Commons, to be equally divided between my sons, Samuel and Ebenezer. And I willed that all my money and other remaining items be appraised, and my 5 children, Joseph, Samuel, Thomas, Ebenezer and my daughter, Hannah, be given equal portions. I also made provision to give Elder Edward Bates 10 shillings in money. I appointed my son Samuel to be sole executor of my will, and requested that my friend Thomas Dane oversee that my will be in all respects performed. You can learn even more about me by reading about me on the genealogy website called Genie. With respect to Genie, I want to remind all of you that the further back you go, the less certain you will be about whether your discoveries and findings are true or not. You will never be 100% sure because it's always possible that even documents can be wrong. With regard to my investment in Ebenezer's son, I am delighted to report to you that my grandson, Ebenezer II, did become a minister. The Presbyterian Church of Bridgehampton is an historic Long Island church that was founded in 1670 by Calvinists, who at first held religious meetings in the homes of settlers rather than walking 10 miles to Southampton for services on Sunday. By 1686, the settlements erected their first meeting house on Bridge Lane in Bridgehampton. Then in 1695, my grandson, Ebenezer White II, was ordained and installed as the first minister of the Church of Christ, in Bridgehampton. He graduated from Harvard, began his ministry at the age of 23, and after 53 years of leading the Bridgehampton congregation, he retired and lived in Sagaponack, until his death at the age of 84. Prior to his retirement, in 1717, my grandson helped to form the first Presbyterian synod, in the colonies. A second church, built in 1737, was located on Sagaponack Road in Bridgehampton, where my grandson also preached. Here are some pictures of the current Bridgehampton Presbyterian Church. The United States federal government has designated the Bridgehampton Presbyterian Church to be a National Historic Landmark. Incidentally, the choir director is now Thomas White. It's time for me to end my story, and say goodbye. I'm glad I had this chance to share my story with you. As you have listened, you may have thought this story sounds like fantasy or make-believe. I assure you, it is not. Please do some research to verify what I have told you. You can do some searching on Google. Goodbye. May God richly bless each and every one of you. Yours sincerely, Thomas White.
Greetings. My name is Ebenezer White. My father is Thomas White, and my son Samuel White is in this line of descent. I was born on the 25th of November, 1648 in Weymouth, Massachusetts, the youngest child of Captain Thomas and Anne, Workman White. On the 2nd of June, 1671, at the age of 22, I married Hannah Phillips, the daughter of Nicholas and Hannah Phillips. Hannah was born on the 25th of November, 1654 in Weymouth and was 16 when we were married. Hannah's father, Mr. Nicholas Phillips, was one of the first settlers from Old England, and tradition will tell you that I built Nicholas Phillips a house. I lived and died in Weymouth in the house afterwards occupied by my great-grandson, Deacon Ezekiel White, an accomplished cabinet maker who was known for his furniture and clock cabinets. The place was not far from the dwelling of the Honorable Christopher Webb, a respected Weymouth lawyer. I was very prominent in my church in Weymouth and was admitted a freeman in 1674. This was important because this status gave me full civil and political rights in the community, including the right to vote and hold office. I served as a town selectman and the townspeople considered me a man of integrity and worth and a respected and useful citizen. No man could have kinder words bestowed upon him. I was commissioned an officer in the Weymouth Company of Militia in 1690. I served in the expedition to Canada against the French and Indians. This conflict came to be known as King William's War and took place from 1690 to 1691. I have been recognized for reaching both the rank of lieutenant and captain. Hannah and I had 9 children. The first child was Ebenezer. He was ordained a minister after graduating from Harvard in 1692. He preached at a church in Bridgehampton, Long Island, where he died in March of 1756. He was married to Hannah Pearson. The second child was Deacon Thomas White. The third was Samuel, who was born in 1676. Samuel was a shoemaker and lieutenant in the Weymouth Company. He married Anna Pratt, around 1700, and died at age 84, on the 18th of August, 1760. Those of you listening to this video are his descendants. The fourth was Joseph. The fifth child was Hannah. The sixth was Abigail. The seventh was Benjamin. The eighth was Experience. The last and ninth one was Elizabeth, who married David Pearson of Long Island, who was the brother of Ebenezer's wife. I died on the 24th of July, 1703 at the age of 55. My will was dated the 19th of July, 1703, and an inventory of my property determined the value to be £955, 10 shillings, and 6 pence.
My name is Deacon Samuel White. My father is Ebenezer White, and my son Ezekiel White Sr. is in this line of descent. I was born in 1676 to Captain Ebenezer and Hannah Phillips White of Weymouth. I married Anna Pratt around 1700 in Weymouth. Anna was born on the 14th of September, 1682 to Matthew and Sarah Pratt, who were both deaf and dumb. Anna was 6 years younger than me. When we were married I was about 23 and Anna was about 17. We lived in the South Precinct of Weymouth. I was a shoemaker. I was chosen deacon of the church in Weymouth on the 17th of February, 1726. I was also a lieutenant of the Weymouth Company. Anna and I had 8 children. The first was Ebenezer. The second was Elisha. The third, Matthew. Fourth, Samuel. Fifth, Elisha the second. Sixth, Jeremiah. Seventh, Anne. And eighth, Ezekiel. Those Whites listening to this video are descendants of Ezekiel. Anna died on the 14th of September, 1757 at the age of 75. I died on the 18th of August, 1760 in Weymouth at the age of 84.
My name is Ezekiel White Sr. My father is Samuel White and my son Ezekiel White Jr. is in this line of descent. I was born on January 1, 1722 or 1723 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. On March 18, 1743, I married Abigail Blanchard. Abigail was born on November 30, 1725. I was about 20 and Abigail was about 18. Abigail and I had 9 children. The first was Abigail. The second was Ezekiel Jr., who was born June 8, 1748 and who married Sarah Vinton on June 30, 1766. Sarah was the daughter of Nathaniel Vinton. Most of you who are viewing this video are descendants of Ezekiel Jr. The third child was Mary. The fourth was Silence. The fifth was David. The sixth was Nehemiah. The seventh was Noah. The eighth child was Sarah. The ninth was Ebenezer. I was 50 when the Boston Tea Party took place. When I was 52, the American Revolutionary War started. In 1777, when I was 54, the Revolutionary War was still raging, and we had been married for about 33 or 34 years. We moved to Chesterfield. Chesterfield and Goshen are twin towns very close to each other. At the time of our move, our 8th child Sarah was about 18 years old. Most of our children were adults at that time. Since most of our children were born in or near Weymouth and were raised there, that was really their hometown and most of them married and lived in or near Weymouth. However, we had many friends in the Goshen and Chesterfield area and some of the wives and husbands of my children were from the Chesterfield-Goshen area. George Washington became the first president of the United States of America on April 30, 1789 when I was 66. He left office on March 4, 1797 when I was 74. John Adams succeeded George Washington as president and was president when I died. I died in Goshen, Massachusetts around 1800 at the age of about 77.
My name is Ezekiel White Jr. My father is Ezekiel White Sr., and my son, in this line of descent, is Nathaniel White. I was born on June 8, 1748 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. I was a blacksmith and settled New Braintree, Massachusetts and then moved to Braintree. I also lived a while in West Hampton, Massachusetts. I married Sarah Vinton of Braintree in 1766. Sarah was born on December 20, 1747 in Braintree. We had 10 children. The first child was Ezekiel III. The second was Peregrine Green. The third was Sarah Vinton. Fourth was Philip. Fifth was Nathaniel, born in Braintree on January 24, 1777. Those Whites listening to this video are descendants of Nathaniel. The sixth child was Abiathar. Seventh was Ephraim. Eighth was Job. Ninth was Dorothy. And the 10th child was William. Thomas Jefferson was president from when I was 54 until I was 62. When I was 62, James Madison became president and was president until I was 70. James Monroe was president when I died. I died on January 10, 1821, in Goshen, Massachusetts at the age of 74. Goshen and Chesterfield are in the same area. Sarah died on January 15, 1837 in Goshen or Chesterfield, Massachusetts at the age of 89. She outlived me by 15 years.
My name is Nathaniel White. My father is Ezekiel White Jr. and my son in this line of descent is Freeborn Green White. I was born on January 24, 1777 Norfolk County, Massachusetts. In 1801, I married Electa Gould in Palmyra, New York. Electa was born in 1775. At the time of our marriage, I was 24 and Electa was 26. I was a blacksmith. Electa and I had 9 children. The first child was Asenath. The second John. The third was Freeborn Green, who is in this line of descent. Fourth was Sarah Vinton. Fifth was Oral. Sixth was Horace. The seventh child was Mary. The eighth was Sally. And the last and ninth one was Charlotte. I died around 1814 in Ontario County, New York at the age of 37. You may wonder why I died so young. I was a soldier in the War of 1812, and I contracted yellow fever which killed me. I am sure that put a very heavy burden on my wife Electra, since she had to raise 9 children without my support and help. When I was 32, James Madison became president and was president when I died.
My name is Freeborn Green White. My father is Nathaniel White and my son in this line of descent is Edwin J. White. I was born on September 16, 1808 in Weiner, Ontario County, New York. On October 18, 1827, I married Amanda Jane Marsh in Palmyra, New York. Amanda was born on February 24, 1811 in Vermont. I had just turned 19 and Amanda was 16. Amanda and I had the following 11 children. The first child was Rosanna. The second was Edwin J. White, who is the ancestor of most of you who are watching this video. The third was Fernando. The fourth was Hollis Marsh. Fifth was Henry. Sixth was Eunice Jane. The seventh child was Nathaniel. The eighth was Lorenzo Dell. Ninth was Mary. 10th was Emerson DeForest. And the 11th and last child was Corey Dunn. You might find it interesting that in 1830, the Book of Mormon was published in Palmyra, New York. In 1830 we lived in Conewango, New York next to Lemuel Marsh and family. We moved from Conewango, New York to Bethany, New York between 1830 and 1840. We lived in Bethany, New York in 1840. We moved from Bethany, New York to Galion Township, Michigan sometime before 1846. We were part of the Great Migration of people from New York to Michigan at that time. Many of the counties in Michigan have the same names as counties in New York. Mary was the first of our children to be born in Michigan. The ones older than Mary were all born in New York. Rosanna and Fernando died before 1850. I was a farmer most of my life, but in 1852 I served as Justice of the Peace in Galion. In 1859, my son Edwin J. White held the same position. I died on March 8, 1864 in Galion Township, Michigan at the age of 55 when my youngest child, Corey Dawn, was only 12 years old. Amanda died on March 21, 1864, in Galion Township, Michigan at the age of 53 within 2 weeks of my death, and some have said she died of a broken heart. After both Amanda and I died, my youngest sons, Emerson and Corey Dawn, moved to Missouri to live with their older brother, Hollis.
My name is Edwin J. White. My father was Freeborn Green White, and my son in this line of descent was Resco Manton White. I was born on March 21, 1830, in Cattaraugus County, New York. When I was 25 years old I married Lydia Marie Spangenberg on July 22, 1855 in Berrien County, Michigan. Lydia was born on July 18, 1835, in Summit County, Ohio. Lydia had just turned 20 a few days before we were married. We lived near my parents, Freeborn and Amanda White, for more than 5 years until sometime after 1860. After 1860, our family took a covered wagon and toured the country looking for a good place to live. Lydia and I had 5 children. The first child was Ermina Adela, who everyone called Minnie. The second was Resco Manton White, who is the ancestor of most of those who are watching this video. Third was Freeborn Green White II, who everyone called Freed. Fourth was Fremont Grant White. And the last and fifth child was Birdie Luella, who everyone called Bird. The first 4 children, Minnie, Resco, Freed and Fremont, were born in Michigan. Bird was born in Iowa. Some say I was an intellectual but did not make much use of my God-given gift. I was self-educated in law and politics. I wrote a book, but to my bitter disappointment, I was unable to get it published for lack of money, and it was later destroyed. My father was a justice of the peace in Michigan, and I served a while as circuit judge there. I guess I was a restless man, always looking for something new. Lydia and I, with our children, spent some time roaming the country in a covered wagon. Lydia, Minnie, Fremont and I rode in the wagon, while Resco and Freed walked behind with the cow that was tied to the wagon. Resco and Freed slept under the stars or under the wagon, and, when it rained, they got wet as rats, according to Resco. In 1868, Lydia and I purchased some land in Morristown Township, Minnesota. We sold the land in Morristown Township in 1871 and moved to Webster County, Iowa. Bird was born in Allamakee County, Iowa in 1871. Resco and Freed purchased land north of Morristown, Minnesota in 1891. We also had a 5-acre tract of land north of Morristown where we lived until my death in 1901. I went to the gold rush in California hoping to find gold, but came back to Morristown empty-handed. Lydia and I were both strong-willed and opinionated, and we had many heated arguments. My grandson, Jesse, later said you could hear Lydia and I arguing from a mile away. I died on November 14, 1901 in Morristown, Minnesota, and Lydia died on March 28, 1931, in St. Peter, Minnesota. She lived almost 30 years longer than me. Lydia was a very courageous woman. At the age of 70, she took a homesteading claim at Daglum, North Dakota, and, after living on 160 acres of land for 3 years, it was hers. She lived in North Dakota until the death of her daughter-in-law. After that she lived with our son, Resco, in Faribault. In her later years, it became impossible for Resco to care of her, and she was taken to the infirmary in St. Peter, Minnesota, where she died in March of 1931.
My name is Resco Manton White. My father was Edwin J. White, and my son Jesse Byron White is in this line of descent. I was born on April 27, 1858 in Galion Township, Berrien County, Michigan. My brother Freed and I spent much of our early years roaming the country with our parents and other siblings in a covered wagon. Our one cow was tied to the back of the wagon and supplied our milk. Freed and I slept either under the wagon or under the stars, and when it rained we got wet as rats. My early manhood was spent in the Morristown, Minnesota area. I married Sarah Jane Eppert on October 16, 1883, in Faribault, Minnesota, Rice County. I was 25 years old. Sarah Jane and I were both singing with a group in Morristown. That's how we met. Sarah Jane and I had the following 7 children. The first child was Benjamin Almond. The second was Harry, who died of scarlet fever at the age of 3. The third was Howard Franklin. Fourth was Edna May. Fifth was Jesse Byron White. Most of the Whites listening to this video are his descendants. The sixth was Joseph Roscoe. And the seventh and last child was Glenn Lorenzo. My father was a very intelligent man and wrote a book. He knew a lot about law and politics. Unfortunately, his book was destroyed and never published, which must have been a very bitter disappointment for him. My mother was a very strong-willed and courageous woman. She was also a very spiritual person. She used to have sessions which today would probably be called seances. I heard many stories about supernatural things happening during her seances. I heard about tables and chairs literally dancing. Here are some of my family memories. Both Sarah Jane and I were heartbroken by the loss of our son Harry. He remained in our thoughts and memories the rest of our lives. Jesse was difficult to manage. He was always getting into fights and I had to punish him quite often. However, when he got to be older, he threatened to fight back when I was going to punish him, and that was the last time I ever threatened to hit him again. As I got older, I realized that I had probably been too harsh on my children, and I told Jesse that he had done a better job of raising his kids than I did. One time I stayed at Howard and Esther's for a few weeks. I slept upstairs in their guest bedroom. Each morning when I awoke, I came downstairs and played the hymn Blessed Assurance. That made an impression on Esther. We were all devastated by the accident that happened to Freed's first wife Jenny when she was only 34 years old. What a terrible tragedy. Jenny's dress caught on fire while she was preparing a meal for her family, and she died 3 days later. I can't imagine what Freed must have gone through trying to figure out what he was going to do since his youngest boy was only 5 months old. Sarah Jane died in June of 1922 and funeral services were held at home and in the Morristown Baptist Church. Sarah was a member of the Morristown Baptist Church her entire life. I know Adelaide, Jesse's wife, followed in that tradition. Before I died, I wanted to make sure I expressed my beliefs to my boys and to let them know what I expected from them. One time when they were all together, I sat down at a piano and played and sang the Lord's Prayer. It was a version that most of you probably have never heard. I then told them what I believed in and what I expected from them. It was a very emotional time for me and for them. Some of them walked out of the room while I was talking. I married Josephine N. Cook on March 5, 1927. I died on January 8, 1934 in my home in Faribault.
My name is Jesse Byron White. My father was Resco Manton White. I was born on June 16, 1892 in Morristown Township, Rice County, Minnesota. I was the fifth of 7 children. I loved and respected my father and believe he was a very good man, but he punished us children very severely when he thought we had misbehaved. One time I had no shoes to wear to school and my father forced me to wear my mother's shoes. I was so embarrassed and ashamed that I didn't go to school and hid in the barn. When my father found out, he gave me a good whipping with a horsewhip. I stayed at home until my early 20s. When I was 21, my father got angry about something I said or did and was going to give me a whipping. I figured I was now 21, an adult, and I had had enough of that. I told him he would have to defeat me because I was going to fight back this time. That was the last time anything like that ever happened. I only went through 8th grade as far as formal schooling goes. I had an abscess on my lung when I was young. I had gotten a chill one time because I wasn't dressed properly for the cold weather, and I ended up with pneumonia. That was what started it. They didn't think I would live. I refused to have the doctor notch my ribs without ether, but the doctor said I was too weak to have ether and, if he used ether, I would probably die, so he went ahead and did the operation with no ether. They notched a couple of my ribs, 1 or 2, and let it drain. We got pus out of it for a long time, something like a pint a day. Later in life, when I had my shirt off, you could see where my skin went in by those notched ribs. I was always a fighter and had a short fuse. It's a good thing I never owned a gun, otherwise I might have used it once or twice. When I was young, I played the fiddle at dances. The first song I played when I got out my old fiddle was Turkey in the Straw. I was able to somewhat play several instruments including the piano and the saw. I taught my wife and daughter Eleanor how to play the saw also. Our favorite song to be played on the saw was Star of the East. On June 5, 1917, when I was 24, 11 days from being 25, I registered for the World War I draft. My brothers Howard and Joseph registered for the draft the same day. My brother Glenn registered 4 days earlier on June 1, 1917. I joined the army and was sent to France during World War I. While I was in France I got deathly sick of pneumonia. By accident, they rolled me out with the dead soldiers thinking I was dead also. Fortunately, someone realized I wasn't. I was dismayed with the military and the military life. There was a lot of immorality in France with many American soldiers and young French women. When I got back from the army, I went to work as a farmhand for the Talsman family in rural Waterville. That's where I met the woman I married, Adelaide Talsman. I married Adelaide on April 26, 1924. I was 31, almost 32, when I got married and Adelaide was only 18. Adelaide's mother was against us getting married and was very upset about it, so we didn't have a formal wedding. My father gave Adelaide a sewing machine for a wedding present. We lived in Faribault for a year until I decided I wanted to buy a farm. I had been a cattle buyer and seller, but I couldn't take being outside in the winter because of my bad lung. I bought a 60-acre farm near Morristown on Highway 60 about 2.5 miles east of Morristown. The farmhouse was originally a barn, winters were cold, and there was no plumbing, no running water and only a wood-burning stove for heat. The first winter on the farm was especially bad. I had been diagnosed with a rare kidney disease, and the doctors told me I was going to die. I went to the Veterans Hospital in St. Paul. While I was there, Freed helped Adelaide with chores that needed to be done on the farm. I believe the sickness was my own fault because I was not doing the things I believed I should be doing. I believe the Lord was dealing with me in a very personal way. I repented and got well. Afterwards, we had family devotions on a regular basis where we, as a family, would take turns reading the Bible and asking questions. Adelaide was convinced that my recovery was a miracle and an answer to prayer because Dr. Francis said only 1 in 5,000 ever recovered from that disease. Since we did not have running water in the house, one of the first things I did was dig a cistern and install a windmill so we had running water. I had to do this work with little to no money. After a few winters using a wood-burning stove, I dug a partial basement, and I installed a central furnace. It took us years and years to pay for the furnace. Technically, we would not have had to make the last payment, but I knew it was an honest bill, so I paid it. Money was always tight. In a good year, we maybe were in the black by between $60 and $100. We raised much of our own food. We went through the Great Depression, and if Hoover had not been removed from office, I don't know what would have happened to this country. There were many inventions in my lifetime. The Wright brothers make the first flight. Automobiles were developed and mass-produced, means of generating and distributing electricity were developed and implemented. Many other things were invented. We probably didn't get electricity until around 1953 or so. I was very much against drinking any alcoholic beverages including beer. I was also against smoking. This probably came from 3 things: my Baptist background, the effect Prohibition had on me and how drinking had affected my brother Glenn's life. During Prohibition, millions of people in the United States were against drinking, not just me. I hated the smell of cigarette smoke. For those of you who never knew me, my views were in many ways similar to the views of the Amish except that I did not have anything against modern inventions and was a little less strict regarding what I believed was proper clothing. I was against women wearing pants, shorts and too much makeup and lipstick. This rule was very difficult for my wife and daughters to accept and go by. When I was an older adult, I was against dancing, going to dances and movies. However, when I was young, I played the fiddle at dances and went to many. I was concerned about my children being around water, so I didn't allow them to be around water without supervision. I probably had too many fears and was overly protective, but I wanted to make sure they were safe. Adelaide and I had the following 13 children. Her first child was Arlene May. The second was Eleanor Inez. The third was Thelma Joanne. The fourth was Jean Alice. The fifth, Jerome Allen. The sixth, Elaine Gertrude. The seventh child was Ione Carolyn. Genevieve Louise was the eighth. Ninth was Frederick Resco. 10th was Ruth Ann. 11th was Arvid J. 12th was Mary Jane, who was stillborn. And 13th was Philip Eldon. I was fairly strict with my children, but not as strict as my father was with us kids. My father used to give us kids lickings with a horse strap when we misbehaved. I believed I had to be in control as a father, especially with 12 kids. I was probably less strict with the younger kids than I was with the older ones. I broke my back while helping the neighbor build a silo. I fell through the roof and landed on my back on the cement floor. I had to lay on my back for months. We regularly attended the Morristown Baptist Church and other similar churches in Faribault, Waseca and Waterville. Most of my children liked music and liked to sing hymns. One of my favorite hymns was Grace Greater Than Our Sin, sometimes called Marvelous Grace of Our Loving Lord. Adelaide died on November 12, 1975 in Rochester, Minnesota. On March 25, 1978, I married Thelma Ellen Alford, and we were divorced in 1983. I died on December 15, 1984 in Eden Prairie, Minnesota.